In the summer of 1995, the Whitlock family vanished without a trace during their weekend retreat at Stillwater Lake. Their fishing boat was found adrift at dawn. Their gear was intact. The picnic table was set for dinner. But the family, David, Ellen, their teenage son Matthew, and 8-year-old daughter Rose, were gone. No signs of struggle, no footprints, nothing. For nearly 3 decades, the disappearance has haunted investigators, the townsfolk, and anyone who dares visit the lake. Tonight, we're pulling back the layers of silence, rumor, and fear that still surround Stillwater Lake, and the truth we uncover will be darker than anyone imagined. If you're drawn to stories of vanishing families, disturbing discoveries, and the buried secrets that refuse to stay hidden, subscribe for more investigations like this one. The sun was low over Stillwater Lake, laying a coppery sheen across the water when Sheriff Thomas Grady first saw the boat. It drifted soundlessly, one oar bobbing in the current, the other tucked against its bench as if someone had left in a hurry. He was 52 then, grizzled and weary, his hands calloused from years of hauling trouble out of this quiet Texas town. Trouble usually meant drunken fights at the bar, teenagers crashing cars, or domestic disputes. Not this. Not a whole family gone missing from the shore of a lake, people considered safe enough to let their children play by, unattended. Grady leaned against the dock railing, chewing the inside of his cheek. 2 deputies scrambled into the sheriff's boat and pushed off toward the drifting vessel. The dock beneath him creaked as he shifted, squinting into the late afternoon light. He wanted to believe it was just an accident, a boat untied, a family hiking in the woods. But in the pit of his stomach, he felt something different. By the time the deputies towed the vessel back, he already knew. The inside of the boat was orderly. A tackle box sat under the bench. 2 life jackets were folded on the floor. The cooler was packed with sandwiches and sodas, still cold. A child's pair of water shoes lay in the bow, one tipped sideways. There were no blood stains, no overturned equipment, no broken wood, no struggle. It was the neatness that unsettled him, the kind of neatness that whispered of interruption, lives suspended mid-act, like a stage play suddenly gone dark. Grady drove up the dirt road to the Whitlocks' rented lakeside cabin as the evening deepened. The place sat quiet, windows glowing amber against the trees. He knocked once, then again harder. No answer. He opened the door. The table was set for 4, plates laid out, napkins folded, silverware aligned. The food was still there, fried chicken in a basket, corn on the cob, a bowl of potato salad. Half-drunk iced tea glasses sweated on the wood. A record spun on the turntable, its needle clicking endlessly at the end of a song. He called their names: David, Ellen, Matthew, Rose. His voice echoed through the empty rooms. No one answered. Grady stood in the doorway, staring at the cabin as the cicadas screamed outside. The world seemed to tilt. It was as if the Whitlocks had stepped out into the dusk and simply dissolved into the air. In the years to come, search teams would comb the woods, divers would scour the depths of Stillwater Lake, and psychics would claim visions of what happened. Rumors of cults, drownings, kidnappings, even lake curses would circle through town like smoke no one could disperse. But on that first night, before the theories and headlines, Sheriff Grady only knew one thing: the lake had taken them, and it would not give them back easily. The first week after the Whitlocks disappeared, the lake seemed to breathe with unease. Neighbors noticed it. Fishermen mentioned it in hushed tones as they tied their boats at dusk. Even children, too young to understand, stopped splashing in its shallows. It was as though Stillwater Lake had swallowed something it shouldn't have, and the whole town could feel it. Sheriff Thomas Grady drove out each morning before dawn, his patrol car crunching along the dirt road that circled the lake. He always stopped at the Whitlocks' cabin, though he knew nothing new would be there. The crime scene tape fluttered weakly in the warm breeze, a pointless barrier against emptiness. Inside, the kitchen smelled of rot now. Flies hummed over the food that had once sat so neatly, waiting for the family who never returned. He kept the windows closed. Letting the smell escape would feel like letting the memory escape too. He would stand in the doorway sometimes, hat in hand, staring at the 4 plates. He could almost see the family as they'd been. David, tall and broad-shouldered, pouring iced tea. Ellen fussing with napkins, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Matthew, lanky, rolling his eyes at his little sister. And Rose with her hair in braids, her elbows on the table until her mother reminded her of manners. Grady would blink, and the vision dissolved, leaving nothing but empty chairs and buzzing flies. By the 4th day, search teams from surrounding counties had arrived. Helicopters beat the sky, their shadows skating across the lake surface. Dogs bayed in the woods, noses to the ground. Divers waded into the water in sleek black suits, vanishing beneath the surface like hunters descending into another world. The whole town came out to watch. People lined the shore, shading their eyes, whispering theories. Maybe they drowned. Maybe someone broke in. Maybe they ran away. None of it satisfied. None of it matched the eerie neatness, the way the cabin felt abandoned mid-breath. Deputy Karen Mills was younger, sharper-eyed than most, and she noticed the details others missed. On the 2nd morning, she found a wet towel hanging on the Whitlock's porch railing, as though someone had left it to dry. When she lifted it, water dripped onto her boots. But the towel was clean. No dirt, no blood, just damp, as if someone had climbed out of the water and wrapped themselves in it, then vanished. She logged it into evidence. Weeks later, she would still wonder about that towel, how ordinary it looked, how silent it remained. The father, David Whitlock, had been a dentist in Dallas, a solid man, church-going, known to fish every summer at Stillwater. His wife Ellen was a school librarian, soft-spoken, but with a steel resolve that people respected. Their son, Matthew, 17, had just been accepted into a state college, and Rose, only 8, loved drawing birds. They were ordinary, perfectly ordinary, and that was what frightened people most. If a family like that could vanish, then no one was safe. On the 5th day, Sheriff Grady gathered his deputies and the search leaders at the ranger station. Maps were spread across the table, red circles marking the cabins, the dock, the trails. His voice was steady, but his eyes were rimmed with sleeplessness. "We've scoured the woods for 3 miles in every direction," he said. "Divers have swept half the lake. No bodies, no clothing, no sign they drowned. The car's still here. Their wallets, phones, IDs, all here. There's no sign they left by choice." "So what are you saying, Sheriff?" asked a state trooper, arms crossed. "Kidnapping?" Grady hesitated. The word hung heavy. Kidnapping required witnesses, a struggle, tire tracks, something, and there was nothing. "I'm saying," Grady answered slowly, "that people don't just evaporate. Somebody knows something." That night, long after the others had gone, Grady stayed by the lake. He stood on the dock where the Whitlock's boat had been found. The water lapped gently against the posts. Fireflies drifted over the reeds. In the distance, the woods murmured with insects and owls. He felt the stillness pressing in. It wasn't just absence he felt. It was presence too. Something watching, listening, waiting. He rubbed his jaw, told himself he was tired. But when he turned back to his cruiser, he couldn't shake the sense that the lake itself had eyes. 2 weeks later, the media descended. Satellite trucks crowded the dirt parking lot. Reporters with perfect hair and sharp microphones stood against the backdrop of pine trees, speaking into cameras with urgent voices. A family of 4, missing without a trace. Their cabin meal untouched, their belongings undisturbed. Local authorities continue to search Stillwater Lake, but so far, the water has yielded no clues. Tourists arrived too. True crime enthusiasts, amateur sleuths, psychics with pendulums and crystals. They took photographs of the cabin, snapped selfies with the crime scene tape, left flowers by the dock. For the townsfolk, it was an invasion. Stillwater Lake was supposed to be their quiet refuge, their summer retreat. Now it was a spectacle, its name in every newspaper and on every TV station. Parents no longer let their children wander. Couples who once rented cabins for honeymoons canceled reservations. The lake had changed. The Whitlocks had not been found, and the not knowing gnawed at people worse than any answer could have. By autumn, the search was scaled back. The lake cooled. The trees turned brittle. Tourists left. Reporters moved on. Sheriff Grady kept one deputy assigned to check the cabin weekly. But the case folder thickened with dust. Theories multiplied. Some swore the Whitlocks had been taken by a cult rumored to meet in the woods. Others whispered of a drifter seen hitchhiking along the highway that summer. A few spoke of something older, stranger, the idea that the lake itself had claimed them, as it had claimed others before. Because the truth was, Stillwater Lake had a history. In 1969, a man named Carl Mendez had vanished while camping on its shore. His tent was left, his canoe tied to a tree. No body was ever recovered. In 1978, 2 teenage girls disappeared after a bonfire on the South Beach. Their shoes were found in the sand. They never came home. In 1983, an elderly fisherman was seen casting his line at dawn. His rod was later discovered propped on a rock, line still dangling in the water. No one had ever connected those vanishings. Not until the Whitlocks. The pattern whispered of something buried too deep for comfort, something most townsfolk preferred to forget. But now, forgetting was impossible. And for Sheriff Grady, who drove past the lake every morning and every night, the whispers never left. They followed him home, into his dreams, into the silence of his kitchen where his own daughter's photograph sat on the mantel. He thought of her whenever he thought of Rose Whitlock, the little girl who had drawn birds and never returned. Some nights he would wake drenched in sweat, convinced he had heard a child crying faintly over the water. 27 years later, in the spring of 2022, a man named Daniel Price arrived at Stillwater Lake. He was not a lawman, nor a local. He was a documentary filmmaker. Price had grown up 2 counties over, a child when the Whitlocks vanished. The story had stuck with him like a thorn. Now, at 40, he specialized in unraveling unsolved disappearances for his YouTube channel, Shadows of the Past. He came with cameras, drones, and a quiet determination. The case file was cold. Sheriff Grady had retired and died 5 years earlier. Deputy Mills had moved to another state. The lake had settled back into uneasy quiet. But Price believed that stories left scars, and scars left traces. On his first evening, he set up his tripod on the same dock where the Whitlocks' boat had been found. The lake reflected the sky in bruised shades of violet and gold. He adjusted his lens, checked the microphone, and spoke into the camera with a steady voice. Tonight, we begin with a question. How does a family of 4 vanish without a trace? What silence covers their footsteps? This is the story of Stillwater Lake. And we're not leaving until we've dragged every secret from its depths. Behind him, the water rippled as if stirred by something unseen. The next morning, Daniel Price unlocked the cabin door with hands that trembled, though he wouldn't admit it to his camera. The hinges groaned like an old throat clearing itself. Dust hung in the beam of his flashlight, swirling lazily. He had studied the Whitlocks' photographs in the archived case file. He knew their faces, David's broad, easy smile, Ellen's gentle eyes, Matthew's coltish awkwardness, Rose's bright grin framed by braids. He had stared at their kitchen table frozen in time, preserved in Polaroids and police evidence photos. But stepping into the cabin itself was different. Photographs flattened things. The air here still felt charged. He adjusted his audio recorder, narrating softly. Cabin 12, Stillwater Lake. This is where the Whitlocks spent their final hours. It has been abandoned for nearly 3 decades, but the sheriff's reports indicate little has changed. The living room was small. Pine-paneled walls, a sagging sofa, a record player covered in dust. The rug bore faint stains where furniture had once stood. He set his tripod near the corner, panned slowly across the room. On the table in the kitchen, faint outlines remained where plates had once rested. The evidence tags were long gone, but Price could still see the ghostly rings of iced tea glasses on the wood. He touched them, half expecting them to be cold. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms, one larger with a double bed, David and Ellen's. The other small twin beds opposite each other. Rose's side still had faint pencil marks on the wall where someone had measured her height, line after line with dates beside them. 7 years, 8 years. His throat tightened. He leaned close, whispering. She was growing. Matthew's bed had been stripped bare long ago, but Price noticed the posters still tacked unevenly to the wall. A football player mid-sprint. A heavy metal band frozen in snarling glory. They flapped slightly when he walked past, as though the house itself exhaled. He filmed it all, methodical, reverent. Outside, the morning light streamed through the trees. He stood on the porch, notebook open. In the margin, he scrawled a word that had risen unbidden in his mind. Suspended. Later that day, Price drove into the small town that bordered Stillwater Lake. Main Street was 2 blocks long. A diner, a hardware store, a gas station with pumps older than he was. Locals watched him from shaded porches, their gazes sharp with the wariness of people long accustomed to outsiders arriving with questions. At the diner, he ordered coffee and pie. The waitress, silver-haired and heavyset, eyed his camera bag with suspicion. "You here for that YouTube thing?" she asked flatly. "Yes, ma'am," he said, smiling. "I'm revisiting the Whitlock case." Her lips thinned. "Revisiting, huh? We lived it. Didn't need cameras then, don't need 'em now." "I understand," Price said gently. "But sometimes, after years, details come clearer. People remember things they didn't know they remembered." She studied him a long moment, then refilled his coffee. "Don't go stirring up ghosts you can't put back," she muttered, but softer now. Her name tag read, Marla. He tried again. "Did you know the Whitlocks?" Marla's shoulders eased slightly. "Everyone knew them." "Nice folks. Brought the kids in for milkshakes once. Polite children. That little girl, Rose, she had a sketchbook. Drew every bird she saw out the window. Do you remember the day they vanished?" Marla's eyes clouded. "Like it was yesterday. They came in Friday night. Chicken fried steak for the parents, burgers for the kids. Paid in cash. Ellen told me she'd be back Monday morning for pie before they drove home. Monday morning came. They didn't." Her hand tightened on the coffee pot. "That cabin's cursed. Always has been." "Cursed how?" She shook her head. "Ask old-timers. They'll tell you. Me." I don't talk about the lake after dark. Price left the diner unsettled. He had expected suspicion, but not that edge of fear in Marla's voice. He scribbled in his notebook as he walked. Bird sketches, last meal, cursed cabin. The sun slid low, shadows stretching across the street. He passed the hardware store where a man in overalls leaned against the doorframe. The man called out, "Looking for trouble?" Price hesitated. "Just looking for answers." "Same thing," the man said, and spat tobacco into the dirt. That evening, Price sat on the dock again, reviewing his footage. The water was black glass, reflecting the stars. His face glowed in the dim light of the camera's screen. He rewound the cabin walkthrough, pausing on the pencil marks in Rose's room. He zoomed in. The last date read July 1995, the month they vanished. His chest tightened. How had that detail not made it into the case file? He scrolled through more footage. Something flickered in the corner of one frame, on the wall by the record player. He slowed it down. A faint smudge, like charcoal. Letters? He adjusted the contrast, the brightness. There it was, barely visible but present. Help us. The letters were jagged, faint. They hadn't been mentioned in the reports. Had the investigators missed it, or had someone written it after the case went cold? The night pressed in around him. The lake rippled softly. He stared at the screen until his eyes blurred. Finally, he whispered to himself, "We're not alone in this cabin." The next morning, Price tracked down the last living deputy from the original search, Karen Mills. She was older now, in her 60s, living in a ranch house on the edge of town. She invited him onto her porch, where wind chimes tinkled in the breeze. Her hair was steel gray, her eyes sharp as ever. "I was the youngest on the team back then," she said, sipping iced tea. Nobody listened much. Grady was a good man, though, haunted by the end. "Do you remember the investigation?" Her gaze drifted toward the lake in the distance. "We turned over every rock. Dogs, divers, helicopters, nothing. It was like the earth swallowed them whole. But I never forgot that towel on the porch, freshly wet. It bothered me." Price leaned forward. "Do you think one of them made it out of the lake?" Mills hesitated. "For years, I hoped so. Hoped one of them swam to shore, ran through the woods, maybe got lost. But hope dies when decades pass, and no one comes home." She studied him. "Why are you really here?" "I want the truth," Price said. "For the family. For the town." Mills's eyes narrowed. "The truth won't set you free here. It'll bury you." Her words hung heavy between them. That night, as Price packed his gear in the cabin, a storm rolled across the lake. Thunder growled. Rain lashed the roof. He sat at the kitchen table with his notes spread around him, the ghostly outlines of the Whitlock's last meal beneath his elbows. Lightning flared, illuminating the room. For an instant, he thought he saw a figure in the corner by the record player. A small girl, hair in braids, sketchbook clutched to her chest. He blinked. Darkness swallowed the corner. His breath came fast. He reached for the camera, fumbling with the power switch. But when the lightning came again, the corner was empty. The storm rattled the windows, and Stillwater Lake roared with rain. Somewhere beneath that black surface, secrets shifted. Waiting. Daniel Price woke before dawn, the cabin air damp and heavy. The storm had passed, leaving the lake calm again, but his sleep had been broken by dreams. Always the same dream. Water lapping at the edge of the bed, footsteps pacing outside the door, a child's voice whispering, "Help us." He brewed coffee on a portable stove, the bitter smell filling the room. Then he set out toward the county courthouse, where archives were kept in a low, brick building that smelled of dust and lemon polish. The clerk, a weary woman with glasses perched at the end of her nose, led him to the records room. "Most of what you're after is on microfilm," she said. "Old police reports, local papers. Don't expect miracles." Price settled into a squeaky chair and fed reels through the reader. The machine hummed, its screen glowing pale blue. Headlines scrolled past. 1969. Camper vanishes at Stillwater, tent left untouched. 1978. 2 teens disappear after bonfire. Shoes found in sand. 1983. Fisherman's rod found, owner gone. 1995. Family of 4 vanishes. Lake drained, no trace. The stories were brief, clipped, written with a detachment that irritated him. Each case was isolated, never connected. But as he read, the similarities coiled tighter. Belongings left neat, meals or tools mid-use, silence swallowing all evidence. He jotted notes: tent, shoes, rod, plates. Always items waiting, always a scene paused, patterns. Later, he drove to interview a man named Henry Cobble, one of the last people alive who remembered the 1969 case. Henry lived in a weathered farmhouse 5 miles from the lake. His porch sagged, chickens pecked the yard, and his eyes were clouded but alert. "You want to hear about Carl Mendez?" Henry rasped, rocking slowly in his chair. "Yes, sir." The record said he disappeared camping at the lake. Henry spat into a tin can. "That's what they said. But I was there the morning they found his camp. Tent flap open, fire still smoking, coffee cup sitting half full. His canoe tied neat to a tree. Like he'd just stepped away. Did they search? Course they searched. Brought in men with dogs, divers, nothing. You know what I remember most?" Henry's voice dropped. "The dogs. They howled. Not barked, not whined. Howled. Wouldn't go near the water. Price felt a chill crawl his neck. "And you think the lake had something to do with it?" Henry's cloudy eyes fixed on him. "Son, that lake takes what it wants, and it don't give back." In the afternoon, Price returned to the diner. Marla frowned when he slid into a booth. "You're still here?" "Still digging," he said. "Did you know about the older disappearances? 1969, 1978, 1983. Her lips tightened. "Everyone knows. We just don't say it out loud." "Why not?" "Because saying it invites it closer." She poured him coffee, her hand trembling slightly. "You think the Whitlocks were the first?" "Number. But they were the loudest. A whole family gone. Harder to bury that story." Price leaned forward. "Do you think the disappearances are connected?" Marla looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You ever notice how the lake never gives up bodies?" "Not once. People drown in every lake in Texas, but at Stillwater they vanish whole. Tell me how that's possible." She left before he could answer. That night, Price reviewed his notes. The storm had scrubbed the air clean, and the lake outside shimmered under moonlight. He replayed the diner exchange in his head. Never gives up bodies. He pulled out maps. The 1969 camp was on the west shore. The 1978 bonfire on the south beach. The 1983 fisherman near the east inlet. And the Whitlock's cabin on the north dock. 4 points. When he connected them, a rough circle formed, enclosing the heart of the lake. He sat back, staring at the diagram. It wasn't proof. It wasn't evidence. But the pattern gnawed at him. The next day, he tracked down the man who had drained part of the lake in 1995. Retired engineer Mark Bell. Bell lived in a trailer on the edge of town, surrounded by rusting machinery and stacks of old blueprints. "Stillwater project," Bell said when Price asked. He scratched his chin, thinking. "Yeah, I ran the pumps. Sheriff ordered it. Never liked it. Why not?" Bell shrugged. "Lake's too deep. Fed by underground springs. You can pump all day, but she refills herself. We lowered the level 20 feet, exposed stumps and old creek beds. No bodies, just mud and bones of deer. Sheriff gave up after a week. Anything unusual?" Bell's eyes shifted. Water was warm down deep. Too warm. Like something brewing under there. I told the sheriff, but he didn't write it down. "Brewing?" Bell wouldn't look at him. "I don't go near that lake anymore." That evening, Price sat again at the cabin table, his camera running. He spread out his notes. Henry's story of the howling dogs, Marla's whisper about bodies never surfacing, Bell's memory of warm water. He spoke directly to the lens. "We have 4 disappearances over 3 decades. Different victims, same lake. Always possessions left behind, as if lives paused. Always no trace of struggle. Always no bodies. The official records treat them as separate. But look closer. These are not accidents. They are not coincidences. Stillwater Lake is a pattern, and patterns point to intention." He stopped the camera, exhausted. His reflection in the dark window looked pale, his eyes hollow. Then he heard it. A soft sound drifting across the water. At first he thought it was wind, but it carried rhythm, cadence, like words. He stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. The lake was silver in moonlight, smooth as glass. The sound came again. A faint child's voice, rising and falling. "Help us!" Price froze, breath sharp in his throat. The voice was swallowed by silence, and the lake stared back, unbroken, as if nothing had spoken at all. Daniel Price told himself he was rational. He believed in records, not rumors. In evidence, not whispers. But the memory of that voice over the lake clung to him like damp clothes. He had replayed the audio from his camera a dozen times. Nothing. No voice, no trace of sound. Just silence and the faint lapping of water. By morning, he convinced himself it had been exhaustion, his brain stitching fragments of storm and sleeplessness into a phantom. Still, when he walked down the dock at dawn, every ripple of the lake felt like an eye blinking. He dipped his hand into the water. Cold. Colder than he expected. He pulled back quickly, drying his hand on his jeans, unsettled by the thought of how deep it ran. The county library held boxes of old case files the courthouse didn't bother to preserve. He spent the afternoon hunched at a wooden table, dust creeping into his lungs, surrounded by manila folders. The Whitlock's file was thick. He spread the contents out carefully. Photographs of the boat, the cabin, the kitchen table, the upstairs bedrooms, witness statements, search logs, dive reports. One note caught his attention, scribbled in Sheriff Grady's handwriting near the margin of a search log. Dogs wouldn't track past shoreline, turned circles, whined. It echoed Henry's story about the 1969 case, dogs refusing the water. Another sheet from Deputy Mills. Personal note. Cabin clock stopped at 7:14 p.m. Plugged in, no outage reported in area. He sat back, staring at the words. Why had those details never made it into official reports? He pulled another folder, the 1978 disappearance. 2 teenage girls, names circled in red pen. Laura Kent, Shelley Moore. Photographs of their shoes in the sand. Parents interviewed, friends interviewed, nothing conclusive. But a margin note read, bonfire ended around 11 p.m. Girls last seen walking toward lake. Witness, unnamed, reports hearing splashing. He flipped faster, pulse rising. The 1983 fisherman case. Just a single page. Rod found, canoe, tide. No body. A note from Grady. Unusual warmth detected in water near inlet. Not reported publicly, warmth again. The files painted a picture stranger than he'd expected. Officially, each case was a tragedy. Unofficially, there were details pointing to something alive. He copied what he could with his handheld scanner, then leaned back, massaging his temples. He felt as though he'd opened a box no one wanted opened. That night he returned to the cabin restless. He set his camera on the table and began to film his thoughts. 4 cases, spanning decades. Different victims, same elements. Neat abandonments, silence, dogs refusing the water. Unusual warmth, all hidden in margins, never reported. Why? Did Grady suppress it, afraid of hysteria? Or did he know something larger? He stopped recording when a sound interrupted him. A thump. From upstairs. He froze, heart hammering. The cabin had been locked when he came in. He stood, quietly reached for the flashlight on the counter, and angled the beam toward the stairwell. Another sound. Softer. A scrape. He ascended slowly, each step creaking. At the top, the hallway stretched pale in moonlight. Rose's bedroom door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The room was empty. But on the wall, above the pencil marks of Rose's height, something new appeared. A wet handprint. Small, child-sized, pressed against the wood as if someone had leaned there moments ago. He backed away, breath shallow, beam trembling. He wanted to dismiss it. Humidity, old stains. But the print glistened fresh, droplets sliding down the wood. He whispered, "Who's here?" Silence. He fled downstairs, slamming the door, heart thundering. Outside, the lake lay black and motionless, reflecting the moon. But he could not shake the feeling that something watched from beneath its surface, patient and endless. The next morning he drove back into town, needing human voices, grounding. At the hardware store he found the man who had mocked him days earlier, lean, weathered, named Earl Dobbins. Earl eyed him with curiosity as Daniel approached. "You look spooked," Earl said, chewing a toothpick. "Did you ever hear of strange things in the cabin? People seeing things?" Earl chuckled. "People hear things all the time. Doors, whispers, water where it shouldn't be. Sheriff used to say it was nerves. I say it's the lake talking. The lake?" Earl leaned closer. "You know what happens when you stare at still water too long? You start seeing things. Your reflection moves wrong. Your own face smiles back crooked. Folks don't last in those cabins." "Not long," Daniel studied him. "Do you think the Whitlocks are still out there?" Earl spat the toothpick onto the dirt. "Out there?" "Number. Down there." That evening, Daniel set his drone into the air, desperate for clarity. It rose over the lake, humming softly, camera panning across the silver expanse. At first, the footage was ordinary, pines leaning, the shoreline etched in shadow. But when he steered toward the center, the water darkened unnaturally. Not just from depth. It looked almost like an ink spill, a black patch too wide and round to be natural. He zoomed in. Ripples spread outward from the patch, though the rest of the lake was glass. Then, movement. Something pale and long drifted beneath the surface, too deep to identify. Not fish, not human, something else. His throat tightened. He nearly dropped the controller. He yanked the drone back, heart thudding, sweat beading on his palms. Later, reviewing the footage frame by frame, the pale shape blurred and vanished. No outline, no confirmation. Just water again. He whispered into the dark cabin. "It's down there." Sleep came fitfully. Dreams twisted. He dreamed of the Whitlocks at their dinner table, faces blurred, hands reaching toward him. He dreamed of Rose, holding her sketchbook, her mouth opening to scream, but water poured out instead of sound. He woke gasping, sheets damp, the faint smell of lake water in the air though the windows were shut. In the silence, he heard it again. A whisper. Closer this time. Inside the cabin. "Help us." And Daniel Price realized that the line between investigating the Whitlocks' disappearance and living it was thinning dangerously fast. By the 5th day, Daniel Price had stopped telling himself it was exhaustion. Too many oddities lined up now. The handprint, the drone footage, the voices. He still clung to his investigative core, but he felt like a diver running low on air, deeper than intended, unsure if he could swim back to the surface. That morning, he drove out to the Whitlocks' hometown. An hour south, past fields of brittle grass and rusting fences. He wanted to see their life before the lake swallowed it. The town was small, neat, orderly. At the edge of Main Street stood the dentist office where David Whitlock had worked. Closed for decades, the paint faded, the windows dusty. A for lease sign swung on one hinge. Next door, the pharmacy. Inside, the pharmacist, an older man with tremors in his hands, remembered them. David was steady, the man said. Not a wild bone in him. Ellen came in every Tuesday for prescriptions. Vitamins, allergy pills for Rose. Ordinary folks. That's what made it so wrong. Ordinary folks don't just vanish, Daniel pressed gently. Do you think David could have run away? Taken the family? The man shook his head. Not a chance. He had patients booked solid through fall. Took pride in his work. You don't run from something you built with your bare hands. The man's eyes misted. That little girl. She used to come in here with drawings. Birds, trees, fish. Always gave me one. Said my counter looked too boring. Daniel thanked him, pocketing the detail like a fragile shard of glass. At the county records office, he requested the Whitlocks' file again. This time, not the disappearance, but their personal records. Marriage license, birth certificates. He found one that made his pulse jolt. A missing report filed not in 1995, but in 1982. The name, Caroline Barrett, Ellen Whitlock's younger sister. Caroline had disappeared at age 17, last seen near Stillwater Lake. Daniel sat back, stunned. The same lake. Another victim. And Ellen had still taken her family there years later. He dug deeper. The file was thin, almost erased. Caroline had gone camping with friends. One morning she was gone. No search records. Just a note. Presumed runaway. Case closed. He scribbled furiously in his notebook. Ellen's sister vanished here first. Did Ellen know? Why bring her children? Why return to the same place? The question spiraled in his head as he drove back. The cabin greeted him with silence, heavy and expectant. He spread Caroline's file across the table. The edges curled, the ink faded, but the photograph, black and white, grainy, showed a girl with wide eyes and long hair. He placed Rose's last school photo beside it. The resemblance was undeniable. Aunt and niece, almost mirror images. He whispered to the empty cabin. Was this the lake's pattern? Generations? His camera recorded as he spoke aloud, his voice trembling. We now know that Ellen's own sister, Caroline Barrett, vanished at Stillwater in 1982. That makes 5 disappearances tied to this place. And the Whitlocks returned, knowingly or unknowingly, to the same waters. This isn't coincidence. This is a cycle. He shut off the camera and stared at the photos. He didn't notice at first, but the air around him cooled, faintly smelling of damp stone. His breath fogged. Then he heard the scratching, soft, rhythmic, from upstairs. He gripped the flashlight, every muscle tense, and climbed. The sound came from Rose's room. The door was ajar again. He pushed it open. At the desk beneath the window, a notebook lay open. His notebook, the one he'd left downstairs. Its pages rustled though the air was still. Words filled the paper, scrawled in a childish hand. Help us! Help us! Help us! Line after line, covering the page. His hands shook as he picked it up. The ink was wet. Behind him, the floor creaked. He spun, beams slicing the room. Empty, but the pencil marks on the wall, the ones measuring Rose's height, were longer now. A fresh line scratched higher, as if she'd grown overnight. The date beside it, 1996, the year after she vanished. Daniel stumbled back, nearly tripping. He bolted downstairs, notebook clutched tight, his pulse racing so hard it hurt. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at the table, the files spread before him, Rose's photo staring back. He spoke into the camera, voice low, shaky. 5 disappearances, all tied to Stillwater Lake. 1969, 1978, 1982, 1983, 1995. Different victims, same patterns. Objects left, no bodies. Cyclical, every few years. But here's what chills me most. Ellen's own sister disappeared at this same lake. And now her daughter's handprints, her measurements appear years after she was gone. The lake isn't just taking, it's keeping. He stopped the recording, sat in silence. The cabin creaked around him. The lake lapped softly outside. And in that silence, the thought struck him so cold, it numbed his chest. What if the Whitlocks hadn't left the cabin at all? What if they were still here? Not alive, not dead, suspended, unable to rest. He took his flashlight and walked to the shoreline. The moon was high, painting the lake silver. Mist curled low across the surface. He stood at the edge, staring into the black water. His reflection wavered, elongated, strange. For a moment, he thought he saw another face beside his. Rose's. He whispered, "Where are you?" The lake rippled once, and from beneath, faint and muffled, came the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks, as though someone were trapped beneath glass. Daniel staggered back, his heart slamming. He wanted to run, but his legs felt rooted. The water smoothed again, perfectly calm. He backed away slowly, whispering to himself, "They're down there." Back inside, he collapsed onto the sofa, shaking. He tried to rationalize, shifting logs underwater, sound carrying oddly. But in his bones, he knew better. As dawn crept pale across the water, Daniel Price sat in the cabin, notebook on his lap, eyes bloodshot, and realized he was no longer documenting a cold case. He was documenting something still alive, something that wanted him to listen. The courthouse clerk had given Daniel a look when he'd asked for Caroline Barrett's case file again. "You're the first person in years to even say her name," she muttered. "Half the town forgot she existed." But Daniel hadn't forgotten. He couldn't. The photo of Caroline, grainy, wide-eyed, echoing Rose, was burned into his mind. Back at the cabin, he laid Caroline's thin file beside the Whitlock's thick one. 2 generations of vanishings, tied not just to the lake, but to one family. He spoke into the camera, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Ellen Barrett Whitlock lost her sister to Stillwater in 1982. 13 years later, she lost her entire family here. Did she know the risk? Was she trying to face it? Or did she believe lightning wouldn't strike twice? He paused, staring at Caroline's photo. What if lightning never left? That afternoon, he drove to Caroline's last known address, a decaying house at the edge of town. The yard was overgrown, windows clouded with grime. A man in his 70s, skin like leather, answered the door. "You Ellen's boy?" the man asked, squinting. "No," Daniel said carefully. "I'm a researcher." "True crime." The man's eyes narrowed. "Then you're digging where you shouldn't." He tried again. "Did you know Caroline Barrett?" The man's mouth tightened. She was trouble. Pretty girl. Drew attention. Hung around the lake with the wrong crowd. Then poof, gone, Sheriff said runaway. "I said good riddance, Daniel echoed, startled. "Girls like her stir the water. And when the water stirs, people drown." The man slammed the door. Daniel stood there, chilled. Caroline had been 17. Hardly a runaway. Hardly trouble. The bitterness in the man's voice sounded less like truth and more like guilt. He stopped at the library again, scrolling through microfilm of old newspapers. There it was. A brief article, July 1982. Local teen reported missing at Stillwater. Caroline Barrett, 17, last seen camping with friends. Personal belongings found undisturbed. Sheriff Grady advises no foul play suspected. Daniel leaned closer. One sentence, easily overlooked. Witnesses reported seeing Caroline sketching by the waterline hours before she vanished. Sketching, just like Rose. He sat back, his chest tight. The pattern wasn't only generational, it was creative. Both Caroline and Rose had sketched birds, trees, the lake. Both had vanished after leaving their marks on paper. He whispered to himself, "It takes those who observe it." That evening he returned to the cabin. The air pressed heavier, as though the lake knew what he'd uncovered. He spread Caroline's article on the table, beside Rose's school photo. The resemblance was uncanny. He set his camera to record and spoke directly into the lens. Ellen's sister disappeared in 1982, her daughter in 1995. Both had a habit of drawing the lake. Both vanished with belongings left behind. This isn't just Stillwater claiming people at random. It's choosing. It's repeating. a cycle through bloodlines. He stopped the recording when the air shifted. A faint slosh echoed from outside, as if something massive had moved beneath the water. He froze, then grabbed his flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The lake gleamed under the rising moon, but along the waterline, dark streaks appeared. At first, he thought they were shadows. Then he saw the color, deep, ruddy red. Blood. It oozed into the shallows, seeping across the sand, before dispersing and vanishing into black water. Daniel staggered back, bile rising in his throat. He aimed the flashlight wildly, but the streaks were gone. The lake was pristine again, reflecting stars. His knees trembled. "You're showing me," he whispered. "You're showing me what you took." Inside, he paced, hands shaking. He tried to rationalize. Iron deposits, algae blooms. But the smell lingered in his nostrils, coppery, undeniable. He collapsed onto the sofa, pressing his palms to his eyes. That's when he felt it. Dampness on the cushion beside him. He snapped his head toward it. A wet imprint. Small. A child's body curled as if lying beside him. The air chilled. Water dripped steadily onto the floor, though the ceiling was dry. He whispered hoarsely, "Rose?" A faint giggle answered. Not malicious, soft, almost playful, but it froze him more than a scream would have. He bolted upright, clutching his notebook. On its cover, new words appeared in smeared handwriting. "Don't look." The pages beneath were damp. The night stretched long. He sat at the table, light on, refusing to close his eyes. The files spread before him looked less like evidence now and more like offerings, tributes to the lake's appetite. Caroline Barrett, the Whitlocks, others unnamed. And as dawn broke pale through the window, Daniel realized he was no longer simply uncovering a pattern. He was inside it, and the lake was watching, waiting for its next turn. Daniel Price hadn't planned on renting a boat. His research was supposed to stay on land, tethered to files and interviews, not drifting on black water. But the longer he stared at the map with its circle of disappearances, the more he knew. Answers lay at the lake's center. The rental shack was a weathered hut by the south beach. The owner, a man with arms like ropes and a cigarette glued to his lip, squinted at Daniel. "You're not fishing," the man said flatly. "No." "Then you're wasting your money." Daniel forced a thin smile. "Maybe I like wasting it." The man muttered something about fools and signed over a small aluminum skiff with a wheezing motor. The boat coughed across the surface, the water calm, the sky low and gray. Daniel filmed as he went, camera fixed to the bow. "This is the approximate center," he narrated, voice taut. "Disappearance sites form a ring around this point. If the lake has a core, psychological, symbolic, or otherwise, it's here." He cut the motor. Silence rushed in, thick and absolute. The lake spread in every direction, glassy, endless. He leaned over the side, staring into the water. His reflection warped. Beneath it, shadows. He squinted, pulse quickening. Something pale drifted below, too long to be a fish. It undulated slowly, like fabric caught in a current. Then it turned. Not fabric, a face, or the impression of one. Blurred, gray, eyes open wide. Daniel recoiled, nearly tipping the boat. He fumbled for the camera, aimed it at the water. By the time he refocused, the shape had vanished. A sudden jolt rocked the skiff. Water splashed over the side. He gripped the edges, heart hammering. "Logs," he whispered, trying to calm himself. "Just logs." But another jolt struck, harder. The boat lurched. Water sloshed. Then a sound rose, not from air, but from beneath. A hollow, resonant thumping, steady, like fists pounding from under ice. Knock, knock, knock. He froze, paralyzed. The boat tilted. A pale hand slapped against the hull from below. He screamed, shoving himself backward. The hand smeared upward, leaving streaks of wet across the metal before sliding back under. The water churned. Pale arms, dozens of them, writhed beneath the boat, clawing upward, trying to pull it down. "No!" Daniel shouted, yanking the motor cord. The engine sputtered, failed. He tried again. On the third pull, it roared to life. He shoved the throttle, the boat jerking forward, spray hitting his face. The arms followed, white shapes rolling beneath the surface, keeping pace. He raced for shore, eyes wide, lungs searing. The boat scraped sand. He leapt out, stumbled onto the beach, collapsing in the wet grit. When he looked back, the lake was calm again, the water smooth, the boat rocking gently as though nothing had touched it. He staggered to his feet, shaking. His camera still recorded. He retrieved it with trembling hands, heart pounding, and checked the footage. Nothing, no arms, no pounding, just calm water. He laughed bitterly, a broken sound. "Of course," he muttered. "Of course it erases itself." But when he turned the camera toward himself, he froze. On his cheek, reflected in the lens screen, was a wet handprint. Small, child-sized. He touched his skin, but the print wasn't there, only in the reflection. He dropped the camera, chest heaving, the truth solidifying in his bones. Stillwater didn't want to be studied. It wanted to be fed. And he had just stepped too close to its mouth. The near drowning haunted him through the night. Even when he left the cabin and sat under the porch light, wrapped in a blanket like a child, the sensation of hands pulling him down clung to his skin. By morning, exhaustion had dulled the terror to a raw ache. He told himself one thing. If the lake wanted to keep its secrets, he had to find someone who tried prying them open before. Sheriff Thomas Grady. The man had died in 2008, but rumor held that he'd left his records behind in a lockbox at the courthouse. Official files were thin. What Daniel needed were the things Grady hadn't wanted on paper. The courthouse basement smelled of mold and time. A clerk, young and bored, waved him toward the shelves with a distracted gesture. Boxes are alphabetical. Anything marked archive isn't sorted. Daniel spent hours digging. Dust coated his hands, crawled into his lungs. Then he found it. A battered ledger marked G with tape peeling at the edges. Inside, neat handwriting spanned decades. Not case reports, not minutes, observations, personal notes. He flipped to 1969. Two gone, boat adrift, dogs circled, whined, refused water. Felt humming beneath dock 1978. Girls vanished near bonfire, found sandals, heat in shallows, though night was cool. Deputies won't write it down 1982. Caroline Barrett, witness said she sang while sketching by the water line. Went silent mid-verse. Found sketchbook soaked but ink fresh. Parents demanded more. Closed as runaway. I don't believe it, Daniel's throat tightened. Caroline's sketchbook had been found. But in the official file, nothing. 1983. Fisherman. Canoe tethered. No body. Temperature shift again. Warmth. Always warmth. 1995. The entry was longer, shakier. Whitlocks. 4 gone. Table set. Clock stopped 7:14. Cabin damp though no storm. Dreams of them for weeks. Here knocking from lake even inland. Tried reporting. Mayor shut it down. Protect tourism. I fear it feeds on attention. We give it what it craves. Daniel leaned back, heart racing. Here was confirmation. Grady had known, had seen the same phenomena Daniel himself was facing. He wasn't hallucinating. He photocopied the entries, tucked them safely in his bag, and left the courthouse dizzy with revelation. The air outside felt thinner, sharper, as if the lake itself sensed what he carried. On the drive back, he rehearsed into his recorder. Sheriff Grady kept a secret ledger. Every case tied together. Dogs refusing the water. Unexplained warmth. Personal belongings abandoned, never scattered. Always order before chaos. Grady suspected the phenomenon wasn't random, but cyclical. Feeding, his voice faltered. The Whitlocks weren't the first. They weren't the last. And maybe... He hesitated. Maybe they aren't gone at all. Maybe they're kept. The cabin seemed darker when he returned. He spread the ledger copies across the table, laying Rose's photo beside Caroline's. Generations, linked by silence and sketches. He filmed as he read Grady's words aloud. But halfway through, the camera glitched. The image warped, bending into static, then clearing again. He replayed it. The distortion lasted 3 seconds, and in the warped haze, he thought he saw faces, blurred, gray, pressed against the glass of the lens. 4 faces. He slammed the camera off, trembling. That night, he dreamed again. He stood in the courthouse basement, the ledger in his hands. But when he opened it, the pages were wet, dripping onto the floor. The ink bled into one phrase, repeated endlessly. "Feed the water." He woke gasping, sheets damp. From the porch, the lake glowed faintly in moonlight, rippling without wind. Daniel gripped the ledger copies, whispering to himself like a vow. "I'm not feeding you. I'm exposing you." But in the silence that followed, the cabin seemed to hum, low and steady, like the heartbeat of something vast and waiting. Daniel drove south again, away from the lake's pull. The highway unspooled through farmland, the morning sun sharp and unkind after nights of fear. His hands trembled on the wheel, the memory of phantom arms still clinging to him. He told himself he wasn't running. He was following the paper trail. The Whitlocks had family in Kerrville. Ellen's cousin, Mary Barrett, had answered his call with cautious warmth. "You want to know about Ellen?" she'd said. "You'd better come in person. Too much can't be said on the phone." Mary's house smelled of cedar and old quilts. She was in her late 60s, her silver hair pinned back, her gaze steady as she poured tea. "Ellen was the strongest of us," Mary began, settling across from him. "After Caroline disappeared in '82, everyone fell apart. My aunt stopped leaving the house. My uncle drank himself to death within 2 years. But Ellen..." She shook her head. "Ellen carried the weight. She never stopped searching." Daniel leaned forward. "Do you believe Caroline ran away?" Mary's eyes sharpened. "Caroline adored her family. She would never have left. Ellen knew it. She said from the beginning the lake had her..." "The lake?" "That's what she told me. She said Stillwater had a hunger, that if you lingered too long, it noticed. She swore she'd seen something in the water when they were kids, faces below the surface, pressed against the ice one winter." Daniel's skin prickled. "But then, why did Ellen bring her own family there in '95? Mary's mouth pressed into a line. "Because she thought she could end it. She believed if she confronted it, if she offered herself, maybe it would release Caroline." He froze. "Offered herself?" Mary nodded grimly. "The week before she left for that cabin, she wrote me a letter. Said she felt called. Said she had to put an end to what started with Caroline. I begged her not to go, but Ellen always carried too much blame. She thought she could bargain with it." Daniel sat stunned. Bargain. The word sat like lead in his stomach. "Do you still have the letter?" he asked. Mary rose and retrieved a box from the hall closet. Inside, beneath photographs and keepsakes, lay an envelope. The ink was faded, the handwriting delicate but firm. Daniel unfolded it carefully. "If you're reading this, Mary, then you know I had no choice. The lake has taken too much from us already. I feel Caroline near it, as though she never left. If it wants me, let it. But maybe, just maybe, it will give her back." The signature, Ellen. Daniel read it twice, his throat tight. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew what she was walking into." Mary's eyes glistened. "And she took David and the children with her. That's what I can't forgive. She thought she was strong enough to face it. but she dragged them all. On the drive back, Daniel spoke into his recorder, his voice unsteady. Ellen Whitlock believed Stillwater Lake had claimed her sister. 13 years later, she returned deliberately, possibly to sacrifice herself in exchange for Caroline. Instead, her entire family vanished. This wasn't a vacation. It was an attempted bargain with something she believed was alive. He shut the recorder off, pulse racing. But as the lake's horizon appeared again in the windshield, he felt less like he was returning willingly and more like he was being reeled back in. The cabin was dark when he arrived. He laid Ellen's letter on the table, the handwriting stark beneath the lamplight. He filmed it, reading aloud. But as the camera rolled, a strange thing happened. The ink seemed to shimmer, just slightly, as though wet again. On playback, the words shifted. The phrase, "maybe it will give her back," warped into, "maybe it will take you too." Daniel shut the camera off, breath ragged. He checked the letter again. On paper, it remained unchanged. But the footage told another story. That night, the knocking returned. Not from the lake this time. From inside the walls of the cabin, slow, hollow, patient. Daniel sat frozen on the sofa, Ellen's letter in one hand, recorder in the other, whispering to himself. She knew. She tried. And now it wants more. The cabin seemed to breathe with him. Every inhale, every exhale, a subtle expansion and contraction of its old wood. Daniel noticed it first at dusk, when the shadows stretched long across the floor. By nightfall, the air inside was thick, almost viscous, like walking through unseen water. He kept Ellen's letter open on the table, his recorder running, his eyes darting to every creak. Ellen thought she could end this by offering herself, he said, voice low. But the lake didn't take just her. It took all of them. And now I think it wants me too. The knocking began again. This time, it wasn't in the walls. It came from beneath the floorboards, deliberate and slow. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel stood, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other. Not tonight, he whispered. Not tonight. But the knocks followed him as he moved from room to room, like a trapped heartbeat under the floor. Upstairs, Rose's door had swung wide open. The flashlight beam cut across her empty bed. On the desk, her pencil had moved. It rested on an open notebook, fresh lines appearing across the page as though drawn by an invisible hand. The sketch, a man, thin, hunched, holding a camera. Him. Daniel staggered back. The pencil scraped again, finishing the drawing with a dark, heavy outline of water rising up around the figure's legs. He grabbed the notebook, slamming it shut. But when he turned, the hallway had stretched, longer, narrower. The door to the stairs seemed farther away, retreating with every step. His breath quickened. No, number! This isn't real. The knocks moved overhead now, above the ceiling, circling. He bolted downstairs, heart pounding, fumbling with the front door. It refused to open. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't budge, as though pressed shut from the outside. The knocking spread, walls, ceiling, floor, surrounding him in a hollow chorus. Daniel backed into the center of the living room, camera trembling in his hands. "You can't keep me," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm not yours." The lights flickered, went out. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Only the faint beam of his flashlight cut through. He swung it wildly, breath ragged. And there they were. Figures lining the walls, pale, waterlogged, half seen, faces blurred, eyes hollow. 4 stood closest. David, Ellen, Mark, Rose. Their outlines shimmered, dripping onto the floorboards. "Please," Daniel whispered, tears burning his eyes. "Tell me what you want." Rose's figure tilted her head. A small hand lifted, pointing toward the door. The knocking stopped. Silence dropped heavy. Daniel lunged for the handle. This time it gave way. The door burst open. He stumbled into the night air, collapsing onto the porch, gulping the cool darkness like oxygen. Behind him, the cabin stood silent again, windows dark, as though nothing had happened. He didn't sleep. He sat on the porch steps until dawn, the recorder clutched in his shaking hands, whispering into it over and over. They're still here. All of them. Not gone, not alive, kept, and they want me inside with them. When the sun rose pale and thin over the lake, Daniel's eyes burned with exhaustion, but he knew something had shifted. The Whitlocks weren't just a cold case anymore. They were a living presence, and the cabin had locked him in once. It could do it again. The air by Stillwater Lake felt different that morning. Too still. The kind of quiet that comes not with peace, but with waiting. Daniel had barely slept. His skin still hummed with the memory of the cabin locking him in, the Whitlocks' ghostly figures circling like mourners. He should have left. Any rational man would have packed his files and driven until the lake was a rumor behind him. But rationality had abandoned him days ago. He was tethered now, by Ellen's letter, by Caroline's sketch, by the sense that if he stopped, their voices would be lost forever. He needed proof. Something undeniable. Something no one could dismiss as paranoia or tricks of the mind. So he returned to the shoreline with his camera. The water was glass, the kind of stillness that made it impossible to tell where reflection ended and sky began. He set up his tripod in the sand, speaking into the lens. Ellen Whitlock believed the lake held her sister. Last night I saw her. I saw all of them. Not gone, not free. Bound. I'm going into the water now to see if anything remains. Artifacts, bones, evidence. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. He stripped off his boots, rolled his pants to his knees, and stepped into the shallows. The water was warm, wrongly warm for spring. He waded to his thighs, the muck sucking at his feet. He pointed the flashlight downward. Silt swirled, shadows shifting. "Caroline?" he whispered. "Rose?" At first, nothing. Then the surface rippled, though no wind stirred it. A pale glimmer appeared below, drifting closer, rising. Fabric. He reached down, fingertips brushing the water. The fabric unfurled, blue, faded, with a white trim. The handbag. Rose's handbag. His heart leapt. He plunged both hands into the water, grasping it. But as his fingers closed around the strap, the lake responded. Arms. Countless pale arms shot up, wrapping around his wrists, his legs, pulling. The water churned violently, dragging him down. He screamed, thrashing, yanking against the grip. His flashlight dropped, vanishing into the depths. "No! Let go!" His voice gurgled as water filled his mouth. The arms were cold, slimy. They clung tighter with every kick, pulling him deeper, past the shallows, into black water. His lungs burned. Panic screamed through every nerve. Then he saw them. Faces below him, dozens, hundreds, all pale, blurred, open-mouthed. The Whitlocks, Caroline, others long forgotten. They reached upward, not pleading but hungry. The handbag drifted among them, spinning slowly in the current. Daniel fought harder, clawing toward the surface, but the hands clamped around his ankles like chains. Darkness closed in, his chest convulsed, desperate for air. Then, impact. Something slammed into his side, hard. He gasped as his head broke the surface, coughing, vomiting lake water. The current had shifted, tossing him sideways. His arm struck a half-submerged log. With every ounce of strength, he clung to it, dragging himself upward, kicking wildly. The hands slipped away. The faces sank. He clawed through the shallows, crawling onto the sand like a man reborn. He collapsed, choking, trembling, water pouring from his nose and mouth. The handbag was gone. But his camera still stood on the tripod, lens pointed directly at him. The red recording light blinked steady. For an hour, he lay on the shore, staring at the sky, too weak to move. The sun crawled higher, warming his soaked clothes, but he felt no comfort, only dread. Because he had seen them, all of them. And for one fleeting second, as he was pulled under, he thought he recognized something else among the faces. His own reflection, as though the lake had already counted him among its dead. When he finally staggered back to the cabin, he replayed the footage with shaking hands. The water, the thrashing, his screams. But no arms, no faces, only him, struggling alone against invisible forces. He laughed bitterly, the sound breaking in his throat. But in the last frame, as he crawled onto the shore, the camera caught something. Behind him, standing knee-deep in the lake, was a girl. Her hair hung wet over her face. Her arms hung limp. Rose. The image lasted only a second before the tape cut to static. Daniel hadn't eaten in 2 days. Coffee and adrenaline kept him upright, but his body felt like glass ready to shatter. The lake had nearly claimed him once. It would not give him another chance without finishing the job. He sat at the cabin table. Ellen's letter unfolded beside the recorder. If it wants me, let it. But maybe, just maybe, it will give her back. Her words looped in his head until he could hardly think. Ellen had believed she could bargain. She failed. But she left behind the idea. Surrender might release what was taken. Was that the lake's hunger? Not random, not cruel for cruelty's sake, but selective, choosing sacrifices to keep itself fed. He stared at his reflection in the black coffee, pale, hollow-eyed, already marked. And in the silence, he whispered, "Take me. Leave them." That night, he walked to the shoreline barefoot, the sand cold under his feet. The camera slung across his chest recorded every step. He carried nothing else. The water was calm, moonlight shimmering across its skin. For the first time, he felt no fear as he waded in, only inevitability. When the water reached his waist, he stopped. "Ellen," he said aloud, voice steady. "Caroline, David, Rose, Matthew, you don't belong here. Let me take your place." The surface rippled. Figures rose, pale and glistening, surrounding him in a circle. Faces familiar, blurred yet recognizable. Ellen closest, her eyes hollow but fixed on him. Behind her, Rose. Her small frame, her soaked hair, her eyes too old for her years. Daniel's throat tightened. "I'll go," he said, "if you let her walk out." The lake stirred. The figures leaned closer. Water climbed his chest, his neck. Hands brushed his shoulders, cold and insistent. He tilted his head back, ready. Then, Rose's voice, barely audible. "Don't!" Daniel froze. Her lips had moved. He saw it. A spark of will flickered in her drowned eyes. "Don't!" she said again, stronger. Her small hand lifted, pointing back to shore. The figures shuddered. The water thrashed. Arms tightened around him, dragging down. He fought, gasping, torn between surrender and survival. "Rose!" he screamed. Her image wavered. For one terrible second he thought she'd dissolve into the others. But then her lips shaped a single word. "Run!" With a cry torn from the deepest place inside him, Daniel ripped free. He kicked, shoved, clawed toward the surface. The water fought back, hands clutching, dragging. But he surged upward, lungs on fire, breaking through with a gasp. He swam blind toward shore, every stroke agony. Arms reached, pulling him back, but he thrashed harder, teeth bared, refusing. Sand struck his hands. He crawled onto the beach, collapsing, coughing lake water until he could breathe again. Behind him, the surface calmed. The figures sank. Only ripples remained. Rose was gone. He lay there under the moon until exhaustion swallowed him. When dawn came, he staggered to his feet, trembling. The camera had recorded it all. He played it back with shaking fingers. There was no circle of figures, no Rose, only him. wading chest deep, shouting at empty water, thrashing alone. He dropped the camera in the sand, staring at the lake. Silent, beautiful, empty, but in his chest, he carried the echo of Rose's voice. He knew he hadn't imagined it. She was still in there, and she didn't want him to follow. As the sun rose over Stillwater Lake, Daniel whispered into the wind, "You've taken enough. You won't have me." But the water rippled once, as if laughing, as if reminding him. It always took what it wanted. 3 weeks later, Daniel Price uploaded his final video. The thumbnail showed Stillwater Lake at dawn, silver water stretching into haze. His voice, low and ragged, opened the recording. "This is Daniel Price. This is my last report from Stillwater. The truth is, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's real anymore." He paused, his face pale in the dim cabin light. "But I saw them. Ellen, Caroline, Rose. They're still there, not alive, not gone, something in between." He leaned closer to the lens. "If you come here, it will take you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will notice you. And once it notices, it doesn't let go." The feed cut to footage of the lake, rippling under moonlight. Daniel's voice continued over it. "I didn't save them. I couldn't. But I heard Rose. She told me not to follow. She told me to run. So I did. I ran. And I survived." For now, the video ended in silence. Daniel never posted again. Subscribers speculated: burnout, breakdown, disappearance. Some insisted the series was fiction. Others swore they saw faces in the static between frames, blurred figures waving from the water. But the camera he abandoned on the sand was eventually found by hikers. Inside, the files were corrupted. Only fragments could be recovered. Distorted images of Daniel thrashing alone, screaming at empty water. And one final clip, unexplained. A single handprint, wet, child-sized, pressed against the lens from the inside. Back in Austin, Daniel lived quietly, avoiding interviews, refusing to speak about Stillwater. At night he dreamed of knocking, slow, patient, hollow. He woke to damp sheets, the scent of lake water clinging to his skin. On his bathroom mirror, streaks sometimes appeared, not written in steam, but traced in water droplets. One word: run. He scrubbed them away each time, but they returned. Daniel Price had escaped the lake, but Stillwater had not let go of him. And somewhere beneath that glassy surface, Ellen, Caroline, David, Matthew, and Rose waited. Not gone, not free, kept.